The ending that arrives before you're ready. Some endings don't ask your permission. They don't wait for you to feel strong enough, prepared enough, healed enough. They simply arrive, quietly, abruptly, inconveniently, like a door closing while you're still standing in the doorway. There are endings that make sense, endings you see coming from far away, endings you meet with relief. And then there are the other ones, the ones that rip a chapter out of your hands before you've finished reading the page. We like to imagine that endings should feel complete, that they should come with clarity, certainty, or understanding. But life isn't built that way. Some endings come too soon, too sudden, too heavy for the moment you're in. Not because you did something wrong, but because life moves according to rhythms that don't always match the pace of your heart. You might still care. You might still feel hope. You might still see possibilities that no longer belong to this version of your life. But endings don't consult what you feel. They reveal what you need. And sometimes, what you need is the very thing you were afraid to lose. There is a grief that comes with an unfinished ending, a grief that doesn't know where to sit inside you. It's the ache of everything left unsaid, everything left undone, everything you thought you'd have more time to understand. You replay moments, search for signs, try to rewrite memories as if changing the past could soften the present. But no amount of analysis can stop something that has already ended. What hurts most is not always the loss itself. It's the fact that the loss didn't wait for you to be ready. We forget that life doesn't measure readiness. It measures movement. It measures growth. It measures the quiet intelligence of what has run its course. And endings, even the early ones, have their own wisdom. Sometimes the timing feels cruel. But timing and cruelty are not the same thing. Life isn't punishing you, it's redirecting you. The ending that arrived too early may have arrived exactly when it had to, not for your comfort, but for your becoming. It's only after the dust settles that we begin to see what the ending protected us from, or what it freed us to walk toward. You don't have to pretend you're okay. You don't have to rush your healing. You don't have to move on before your heart can follow. Not being ready doesn't mean you failed. It simply means you cared, and caring is not weakness. It's humanity. The heart doesn't operate on deadlines. There is a kind of strength that grows only when something ends while you're still holding on. A strength shaped by acceptance, by surrender, by learning how to breathe inside a moment you didn't choose. You learn to stand in the empty space between what you wanted and what reality delivered. You learn to live without closure and still find peace. The truth is this: some endings aren't meant to be understood, only lived. You don't force meaning, you let meaning find you. And it will. Slowly, quietly. In the spaces where resistance softens and reality becomes something you can touch without breaking. You grow differently after an early ending. You learn to trust your capacity to rebuild. You learn to trust the part of you that survives what you weren't prepared for. You learn that readiness is not a requirement for transformation. Presence is. And presence is something you can choose even when everything feels shaky. One day, not today, not quickly, you will look back and understand that the ending wasn't rushing you. It was saving you from staying too long in a place that no longer matched the person you're becoming. Readiness isn't about feeling prepared. It's about allowing life to unfold even when the timing breaks your heart. And you are allowed to carry both grief and growth at the same time. If something ended before you were ready, let yourself feel the weight of that truth. Let yourself slow down. Let yourself breathe deeper. Let yourself soften around the edges of what hurts. Endings aren't interruptions. They are invitations. And even if the invitation arrived too soon, it arrived for a reason your future self will thank you for. If you stayed until here, something in these words touched the place in you that still feels unfinished. The part that didn't get a proper goodbye, that didn't get closure, that didn't get time to prepare. So this second part is not about understanding endings. It's about sitting with the pieces they leave behind. Begin by noticing what your body does when you think about the ending that came too soon. Does your chest tighten? Do your shoulders rise? Does your throat feel heavy? Does your breath pause for a moment? Just observe it. This is where your story is living right now. Ask yourself gently, what was I still holding on to when the ending arrived? A hope? A version of the future? A person? An identity? A feeling you weren't ready to release? Let the first truth appear, even if it's soft, incomplete, or confusing. Now bring to mind one thing that made the ending feel premature. Not the whole story. Just one moment you wish you had more time with. Sit with it. Not to reopen the wound, but to finally acknowledge it. Because part of what hurts is the part of you that still wishes for one more day. Now ask yourself, what part of me was the ending trying to protect? Sometimes life closes a door to save you from a path that would have drained you later. Sometimes it removes something to return you to yourself. Sometimes it ends something so you can stop shrinking to fit it. You don't have to believe this fully right now. Just let the question exist in you. Now think about the version of you who tried to hold things together even when they were already falling apart. What were they afraid of? What were they trying to preserve? What did they feel responsible for? Honor that version of you. They were doing their best with the information they had. But endings teach what effort alone cannot fix. Now bring your attention to the silence after the ending. Not the dramatic silence, the quiet one. The silence where you check your phone less. The silence where conversations stop. The silence where your routine feels unfamiliar. The silence where something is missing even if you can't name exactly what. Ask softly, what does this silence make me feel? Loneliness, confusion, relief, fear, emptiness, all of the above. Whatever rises, let it rise. This is your inner world speaking. Now imagine the timeline of your life as a long, winding path. Think about how many times your story changed, even when you didn't feel ready. Yet here you are, still breathing, still learning, still becoming. Ask yourself, where in my life did an early ending lead to something I didn't expect? Let one memory surface, a moment where things falling apart made something else fall into place. Not to force gratitude, but to remind you that you've navigated this before. Now think about the grief of unfinished endings, the ache of unanswered questions, the weight of unspoken sentences, the longing for closure you may never get. Ask honestly, what am I still hoping will happen, even though I know it won't? Not to judge yourself, but to free yourself. Now breathe deeply, let your shoulders drop, let your jaw loosen. Ask yourself, what truth has the ending revealed that I was afraid to see? Maybe you needed more. Maybe you deserved better. Maybe you outgrew someone. Maybe the story wasn't meant to continue. Maybe you were holding on to potential, not reality. Maybe you were loving alone. Maybe you were staying out of fear. Let the truth come in whatever shape it chooses. Now think about this question, one of the most important ones. What part of me is trying to begin but hasn't had space to? Maybe your voice, maybe your independence, maybe your peace, maybe your creativity, maybe your boundaries, maybe the version of you that always had to wait for permission. Endings create room for beginnings, even beginnings you don't recognize yet. Now imagine the future version of you standing somewhere ahead on your timeline. They are not fully healed. They are not perfect, but they are steadier, quieter, more aligned, more themselves. Ask them silently, what did this ending teach you that you couldn't learn in any other way? Let the answer come slowly, in a feeling, a thought, a shift. You don't need details, you only need direction. Now return to your breath again. Notice how it moves through you even with the weight you carry. Notice how your body continues even when your heart feels interrupted. Ask yourself one final question, the kind that opens the next door. What if this ending is not the end of my story, but the beginning of my return to myself? Let the idea soften something inside you. Let it make room for possibility. Let it remind you that you do not need to be ready to begin again. You only need to be willing. You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to move forward slowly. You're allowed to carry your tenderness with you. And you're allowed to become someone new because of what ended too soon. This video is part of a daily path, a space to breathe through the endings you didn't choose, to restore clarity where pain once lived, and to walk gently toward what comes next. Tomorrow brings another chapter, another reflection, another quiet pause. If it feels right, come back. We'll continue together, one day at a time. This is Form Within Mind, where calm takes shape.